Chapter 5. The red energy beams glanced harmlessly off of Ryuk's armoured chest, and did the same on the two Daleks' casings. Teppel was shielded by Ryuk, who was standing in front of him by happy coincidence. "Stun guns," Ryuk said incredulously. "Pacifists."
"Weapons useless against Dalekanium,"
Lex stated matter-of-factly. He then fired two quick bursts and the guns exploded, short-circuiting and clattering to pieces.
"We may proceed."
In the council chamber, Laika turned in fear to her aide as he said nervously, "They're on their way, Senator." Laika rubbed her temple again. Her people loathed violence, and the Guardians were only tolerated as part of tradition. She had not forgotten that they were the last of the warlike clan on their planet. She turned to them apprehensively. "Defend us. Do not allow them into this room," she said, with as much conviction as she could muster. The Guardians, who numbered half a dozen in total, turned without a word and filed out of the chamber. Upon leaving the room, they came face to face with the intruders in one of the larger corridors. Ryuk stopped, holding up a hand to stop his comrades. Trip and Lex halted and immediately scanned the Guardians. Teppel looked at them in awe. "Whoa! Who the hell are they?" he said in surprise. "This is more like it," Ryuk said. "Looks like your people haven't gone completely soft." The Guardians held up their dangerous-looking weapons, which were an assortment of spears, swords, and maces.
"Exterminate!"
Lex cried, but Ryuk interrupted. "Stop," he said. "It's been a while since I've had a chance to engage in proper combat." And he drew a katana-like blade. It was black, with a gold tip. The guard of the sword was dark red, and the handle silver, with blue recessed areas. Lex shook his dome, half in annoyance and half in amusement.
"This again,"
he said. Teppel watched Ryuk, sword drawn, stomp towards the 6 Guardians. "There's 6 of them and only 1 of you," he said in disbelief. Ryuk turned with a grin. "I know, it hardly seems fair." He turned back just as the first Guardian swiped down with a sword. Ryuk's sword met it as the swords clashed. The pair duelled in a fast-paced swordfight, but Ryuk moved so fast that the Guardian was quickly overcome, and Ryuk's blade sliced through the Lutian warrior's chest, and red blood stained the white walls. This time, 2 Guardians, one wielding a mace and the other holding a spear, charged at Ryuk, who deftly dodged their attacks. He dropped, rolled, and kicked up from the ground, knocking the mace-wielding Guardian to the floor. Ryuk flipped to his feet and cleaved the remaining Guardian's spear in 2 with his blade. The Guardian looked blankly at the circumcised spear, and Ryuk deftly sliced into his neck, all but decapitating him. The flawed Lutian scrabbled to his feet and swung the mace upwards, and Ryuk parried with his blade. The mace clung around the blade, and the Guardian tugged, pulling Ryuk's sword out of his hand. It clattered to the floor. Ryuk, rather than try to retrieve it, leapt onto the Guardian and grabbed the mace, wrapping it around the Lutian's neck. He tugged it taut, which snapped his foe's neck with a crack. He went to retrieve his sword, but the final 3 Guardians attacked, all at once. Teppel watched Ryuk somehow manage to keep the 3 aggressors at bay, without so much as a weapon. This creature was truly terrifying. He actually seemed to be enjoying himself, as if the attempt on his life was no more than a challenge, a game. Ryuk managed to maneuver one Guardian in front of his fellow, and one Guardian stabbed the other with his spear. The wounded Guardian dropped to the floor, grunting in pain. Ryuk held a hand out towards his sword on the floor. As he did, the horn on his head began to glow faintly. Teppel frowned in confusion. The blade appeared to be dancing on the floor, as if moving of its own accord. The sword then flew with speed into Ryuk's outstretched hand. Ryuk quickly stabbed the spear-wielding warrior, and as the other Guardian prepared to stab Ryuk from behind, Lex fired a quick shot, which struck the armoured Lutian, who cried out and fell unmoving. Ryuk turned to Lex disapprovingly, tutting.
"I slipped,"
Lex said simply. Ryuk grinned. He looked down at the wounded Guardian apathetically. He stabbed him, not out of malice, thought Teppel, but out of mercy. The white corridor was now more red than anything else, and the 6 Guardian corpses bled all over the floor, making it sticky. Teppel looked up at Ryuk and asked, "Was that telekinesis?" Ryuk shook his head. "No, it's like telekinesis, but it's different. Come on, time to see the Senator." Ryuk, Trip, and Lex proceeded, and Teppel mumbled to himself, "Sure looked like telekinesis to me." Inside the council chambers, the councilmen cowered in fear as Ryuk and his Daleks entered. Laika stood her ground, though. "I implore you to take my life, but spare the others," she said bravely. "I don't plan to take your life," Ryuk said simply. "I'm here for the device and the human." "Give them what they ask for," Teppel urged her. "Too many people have died today. If it will ensure safety of Lutian lives, then I accede to your demands," Laika said. We owe the human no loyalty. He is the reason you're here, and thus the reason for the deaths." "That's the first sensible thing I've heard a Lutian say," Ryuk said. "And the device?" Laika's aide passed her a simple black box, which she presented to Ryuk. Opening it, Ryuk peered inside. It contained the data sphere. He took it out with one armed hand, examining it. "It's been accessed," he accused. "Not by us, I promise you. We hadn't yet had chance to break the encryption. We didn't even know what it was," Laika assured.
Detector indicates truthful response,
Trip interjected. Ryuk's gaze was piercing as he stared at her. She sighed in relief as he turned away, passing the sphere to Lex, who took it in his manipulator arm. "Okay, so that's the device. Now, take us to the human." Inside his room, Silas lay, the beeping of the heart monitor still present, but getting slower and slower. He knew his enemies were here. The door opened, and Ryuk entered, Trip behind him in the doorway. Ryuk and Silas's eyes locked on each other. "So, you're the one that's caused us so much trouble," Ryuk said. Silas chuckled, and then spluttered a cough.
"General Ryuk, as I live and breathe. A pleasure to finally speak with you. I am Agent Silas Henshaw of the Eden Alliance,"
he said in his gravelly voice. "Well, Agent Henshaw, you won't be living and breathing for very long," said Ryuk.
"You're not wrong, General. I am dying."
Silas coughed again, pointing at the heart monitor. Ryuk turned to Trip, who he knew was scanning him.
Scans indicate high levels of toxicity,
Trip stated.
"The hazards of using experimental technology,"
Silas said casually. Ryuk turned back to him. "Lightwave sickness?" he asked. Silas smirked.
"Yes, although that's only the tip of the iceberg. I was dying even before I took this mission. Doctors gave me 6 months. So when the Alliance came up with a plan to discover vital intelligence on the greatest threat to mankind, I leapt at the chance. What better way to die than to save your species?"
Silas's gaze was just as intense as Ryuk's, and the two were almost engaged in a staring match. "Well, you failed, Henshaw," Ryuk said simply.
"Have I?"
Silas asked.
"I examined the sphere. I know all about you, where you come from. You're human in origin. In fact, related to someone high up in the Alliance. How deep does this thing go, I wonder? A human mixed with Dalek DNA, the perfect weapon to use against humanity. All of our strengths, none of our weaknesses. And of course, you aren't the only one. There's another, a female. Most interesting."
"I'm glad you're enjoying yourself, as you'll never get to share this intel with your people," said Ryuk.
"My people? You mean our people, Ryuk? Look at yourself. You really think you're one of them? You're a human, a pet, a guinea pig. Charades are humorous, and you're the biggest charade of them all. I wonder when you'll realize how much you're being used. You get to survive a prisoner of the Golden Emperor Dalek, and I get to die a free man. Victory really depends on one's point of view,"
Silas said, with an infuriating grin. Ryuk's hip armor opened up, and he swiftly drew a gun akin to a Dalek gunstick, and leveled it at the human. The beeping of the heart monitor got slower and slower.
"I finally feel like I've accomplished something with my life. I guess you could say I've arrived."
The bleeping turned to a flat tone as Silas died with a sigh.
the human is dead.
Trip declared. Ryuk's gun shook with anger for a moment, and then he reholstered it. "And not a moment too soon. Let's go," snapped Ryuk. Epilogue. The Daleks returned to their spaceship, Lex still holding the memory sphere. Teppel and Ryuk were bringing up the rear. Teppel couldn't help but still be fascinated with Ryuk. "You're different since you came out of the spire," he said. Ryuk glanced at him quickly. "What are you talking about?" he asked. "Before, you were all bravado and confidence. The human really ruffled your feathers, didn't he?" Teppel probed. "He's dead. We got the sphere. Our mission is complete. That's all that matters," said Ryuk, as Lex ascended the ramp of the ship and entered, followed by Blaine and another Dalek. Trip and Snidge then filed in. Snidge glared at the Lutian. The creature had seen far too much of the Daleks' operation here on this planet. Any Dalek commander would have killed it in a moment. But human weakness stayed Ryuk's hand. Snidge entered the ship without a word. Teppel glanced up at Trip. I wish I could say it was a pleasure being your prisoner, Trip, he called out. Trip turned to him puzzled.
Statistically, humanoid life forms do not survive more than one encounter with a Dalek. You should hope you do not see us again,
said the Dalek, who entered the Dalek craft. Teppel smiled, despite himself. They're all heart, aren't they? He asked Ryuk. The hybrid looked Teppel up and down. You are puzzling, Lucian Teppel. I confess I've enjoyed conversing with another humanoid, but the next time the Daleks come to this world, it'll be when the Emperor orders it conquered. If you're lucky, you'll have died by old age by then. It's like you're pretending to be a Dalek, but there's more to you than that. I can tell, Teppel said. Ryuk sighed, exasperated. Farewell, Lutios, he said, climbing the ramp and entering the craft. The hatch closed and the ramp withdrew. Teppel watched as the ship quietly elevated and descended into the sky. He followed it into the atmosphere until it was a glimmer in his eye. Goodbye, Ryuk, he said quietly. He turned and proceeded to walk back to the shelter. He had to find Pera and tell everyone the intruders had left, and Timmit would want to hear all about his adventure. On board the Dalek spaceship, Snidge was in a private room. His manipulator arm engaged a communicator. He spoke clearly.
I have sent my report, Supreme Dalek.
The end. Arrival was written by Phil Owen and read by Phil Owen. Characters created by Andrew Wagstaff. Second Empire created by Mechmaster.